Hello and welcome to GameStalgic. As always, I'm Shane, and today we are going to be reviewing one of the most iconic video games ever released. With selling more than 9 million copies after its initial release, Final Fantasy X has become one of the most successful titles within the Final Fantasy franchise. To stay up to date on other great classic game reviews though, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing. I post brand new reviews every single Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, to review this classic Final Fantasy game, we are going to take a look at 5 categories, which are followed as the story, visuals, audio, gameplay, and lastly, if it's worth your time and money in the new age of gaming. Each category will have a base value of 10, which will equal out to a possible max score of 50. Beginning with the story of Final Fantasy X, players are introduced as the main character known as Tidus or Tidus, depending on how you pronounce his name. I'm sticking with Tidus as that's how I've always said it, so feel free to correct me down in the comments below on how you pronounce his name. Tidus is a rising star of the Xanark and Abes, which is a blitzball team. But what exactly is blitzball, you ask? Well, it's a mix of handball and soccer, and they also play it underwater. That's pretty cool, right? Anyway, things begin to take a dangerous turn when Xanarkin is attacked by a creature known simply as Sin. Tidus is transported and is left wondering where he exactly is. A more powerful story begins to unfold though, but I will leave it there just for the sake of spoilers. What I can say is that this is one of the best Final Fantasy stories that I have ever played, and I had actually forgotten how well developed it actually was. It was a breath of fresh air to replay through this game again in 2022. The story of Final Fantasy X receives a score of 8 out of 10. Next we have the visuals. Now, I'm playing through Final Fantasy X again on the original PlayStation 2 system. I'm not playing one of the HD remasters of this title for this review, as I wanted to experience the traditional graphics of the game. And boy, it's a little bit of a toss-up. The FMV movies still look fantastic in 2022, don't worry about those at all. The cutscenes look amazing. The actual graphics have definitely aged a bit though, but I think they are finally starting to show their age just a little bit. The jaggy textures are pretty prominent during gameplay, but I do realize that the game is 21 years old. The blocky player models really take a hit as the textures have kind of started to look like they're just kind of pasted on, which ain't too really good on the eyes when you're playing. Again, this is the first time I've actually played this game since I owned it as a teenager. Yes, I'm getting old, I realize that. For 2022 standards, this game looks rough, but it's not enough to where it isn't playable. Thankfully, all the anti-aliasing that was implemented during the development process from Square's side, and the rough textures, they come off kind of like soft overlays. It makes the game still look pretty decent even after all this time. The visuals of Final Fantasy X receive a 7 out of 10. The third category is audio. Oh my, how this audio still sounds after all this time. From the opening theme to the battle theme to even the battle sounds and even to the credits and after, everything sounds so genuine when I replayed this game. Square really nailed the atmosphere and the sound effects of Final Fantasy X, and we can't forget the voice acting either. Even in 2022, this game sent so much nostalgia my way when I played again, and I fell back in love with the game, which was a lot of due to the audio and the songs in Final Fantasy X. Of course, the voice acting seems like dialogue from a cliche movie from the 2000s at certain times, but let's not forget that this game was the first Final Fantasy to have a narrative voice acting throughout the entire game. That is a pretty good staple for this franchise because this paved the way for the rest of the games in the series. The audio is stunning and a really big highlight if you choose to revisit Final Fantasy X. The audio category receives a 9 out of 10. The next category is the gameplay. Where does the gameplay stand after 21 years? Well, let's just say you're in for a treat. From the blitzball minigames to the standardized turn battle system, all the gameplay within Final Fantasy X feels relative and modern even in 2022. The only thing that was kind of weird was the cloister trials, which is a bunch of trials you have to get to progress in the game to get other summons. And I felt that was a bit dated, but it wasn't. It was a minor inconvenience while I was playing because puzzles weren't ever a huge thing and a huge aspect of Final Fantasy games to begin with. So if anything, these trials were actually a step up from the titles that came before them. The sphere grid leveling system feels a little bit standard from then to nowadays of RPGs, but it's still a pretty nice twist on that original progression system, and like I said, they're still in games today. The combat diversity felt like a warm welcome home as I replayed the game. Final Fantasy X just hits all of the right notes for me as an RPG enthusiast, as I'm sure it will for you if you choose to revisit this game in 2022. The gameplay receives an 8 out of 10. Now moving on to the last category in this review, is Final Fantasy X worth your time and money after 21 years? I personally believe that it really is. It's especially true if you have never experienced Tidus' story before. You'll get to experience a brand new world that you thought was not possible at all that games are able to create. A very magical, enjoyable time is ready for you when you start up Final Fantasy X, and through the entire game it lasts. Final Fantasy X, even if some things feel pretty dated, they really give that nostalgic feeling if you've never played it before, or if you're looking to re-experience it. It does a lot of good things. Square really captured the essence of the turn-based battle RPG system with Final Fantasy X. The value of a money category receives a 10 out of 10. So after crunching the numbers, Final Fantasy X receives a final score of 42 out of 50. While some things are showing their age, a lot of it still feels really fresh when playing Final Fantasy X 21 years after its initial release. The original also had multiple HD remasters that are available to you if you don't want to have to worry about the hassle of converting your PS2 audio and video to an HD TV or a monitor. So there's a lot of good ways to experience Final Fantasy X. If you had never played Final Fantasy X before, or maybe you're just curious of how well it holds up, then I really hope this video helped explain that a little bit better to you. But I hope you enjoyed this classic gaming review. If you did, a like would be very much appreciated because I put a lot of work into this video, and that helps me know that I'm delivering the best content to you. Also, don't forget to subscribe because I put out brand new classic gaming reviews every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in to GameStalgic today. As always, I'm Shane, and I will see you in the next GameStalgic review.